time, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom to maintain the queue. Otherwise, please make sure to keep yourself muted in order to minimize any disturbances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naman, for a wonderful introduction. Okay. Naman was one of our very close devotees for a very long time, and we are happy that he is now at Stanford. He represents the academic group of Stanford. Thank you, Naman, so much. Okay. So we are now continuing this discussion on the philosophy of Nimbarka. So I would like to add a few important points in this connection. First we discussed Advaita philosophy, which is non-dualistic system, and then we took up these different Vaishnava traditions, and of course Ramanuja, Madhva, and so on. Now, something very interesting about these non-Advaitic philosophical systems, mostly Vaishnava systems. And one of the most interesting features of this philosophical traditions, all these traditions, is that they're extremely humanistic. You find them, especially those who belong to Madhva and Chaitanya system, the ISKCON, the Hare Krishna and Madhva systems. They are very dogmatic and very emphatic in putting forward their ideas as doctrines. So they are somewhat dogmatic. But at the same time, this dogmatism is the only area where they are one-sided. In all other areas, they are extremely sattvic, non-violent, peaceful, accommodative, broad-minded. So this is an important point to remember. Certain traditions can be extremely dogmatic in overemphasizing the idea that their system or their view is the only correct view. But at the same time, in their practical dealings with other people, they are very, very broad-minded, very compassionate, very humane. This is a very interesting aspect of all these Vaishnava systems. If you observe how they live, they are very, very peaceful. Physically, they are very, very non-violent. All of them are cutthroat vegetarians to boot. But at the same time, they emphasize the fact that their view is the supreme, maybe the only view. When it comes to Advaita, they on the one hand, they emphasize that Advaita accepts all views, all other ideas. At the same time, they consider all different traditions as non-alien to them. There is no otherness in Advaita. They accept everything. Well, to give an example, because this is a Western intellectual climate, so I can just compare this. Can you imagine, any of us, can you ever imagine a man like Vivekananda coming to Parliament of Religion in Chicago and talking about Madhva system? I think the listeners would be totally unimpressed if Swami Vivekananda had talked about Madhva system, which emphasizes difference, distinction at the doctrinal level. Or even discourse system. Suppose Swami Vivekananda, just imagine, hypothetically, the Swami Vivekananda coming to the Parliament of Religion and saying that Krishna is the only God. All other gods are subservient to him. All other gods and goddesses are Krishna's servants. Lord Krishna's servants, assistants, juniors, subordinates. Krishna is the chief. I don't think 4,000, 5,000 Americans would have got up and clapped their hands in appreciation. Very unlikely. But what Swamiji said was this. Well, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, or any other tradition, they are all equally valid paths leading to the same goal. This is Advaita view. So you can imagine, on the one hand, at the doctrinal side, all these Vaishnava systems are extremely emphatic in making the statement that they alone are correct. At the same time, as a community, as individuals, they are extremely peaceful, extremely sattvic, absolutely non-violent people. That's a very important point to keep in mind. Now about Nimbarka. So, as I mentioned, one important aspect of Nimbarka system was it is very, very humanistic as any other Vaishnava system. And then you often read, when you read books on Nimbarka, you often read about the Nimbarka Sampradaya. Now, Sampradaya is a kind of denomination. So, a Sampradaya is a Sanskrit word. That view is a heritage, a lineage coming from ancient times, coming from the Manasaputras, means children of Brahma, the creator God. Sanaga, Sanat Kumara, Sanatana, etc. Now, and this tradition comes from those ancient times who were children of God and also Narada. And now, this is one aspect of Nimbarka system, which I don't feel is very, very important for us to discuss right now, because it is somewhat mythological. Of course, a traditional Nimbarka devotee may not fully agree with me, but there is no need to agree, of course. So there is one aspect, mythological, semi-historical aspect of Nimbarka philosophy, according to which Nimbarka's philosophical tradition, spiritual tradition, begins with the creator God Brahma and his children Sanaga, Sanatana, Sanat Kumara, and of course Narada, the sages. They continue this tradition. And then this Narada, this mythological sage, he initiated Nimbarka into the Vaishnava tradition. Now, this aspect we need not take very seriously, because it is important only for those who belong to that denomination. It's just something like saying, if you believe in a traditional Christian, may perhaps take many of the stories from the Old Testament as literal facts, very literal interpretation, they may accept. But that may not be acceptable to a modern exponent of Christianity, maybe a non-baptized Christian like Gandhi, for example, or Vivekananda. They were great admirers of Jesus Christ as a great spiritual person. They may not fully endorse the views coming from the Old Testament, or like stories of Leviticus and Exodus and many of the stories, Solomon, all those stories coming which are found in Old Testament. Well, they may respect all those mythological stories because the stories do have a message behind them. But beyond that, they may not consider them as historical facts. They may consider the Sermon on the Mount or the great parables of Jesus as more important than the story of Solomon or maybe other, Old Testament characters. So that's something. Now, according to Nimbarka tradition, they believe in the worship of Radha Krishna. Radha is a personalized and inseparable deity of their tradition. Radha is a feminine divine archetype in this system. Now, you don't find this Radha so much mentioned in the Bhagavata Purana. Madhvacharya did not ever mention, nor Ramanuja. As I mentioned earlier, Ramanuja's system belongs to what is called Panjaratra tradition, Panjaratra Narayana Vaishnava. So more philosophically oriented. Even Madhva is slightly more philosophically oriented than Nimbarka. In Nimbarka system, there is so much of mythological connection. For example, Radha was the feminine archetype living in Vrindavan, and Krishna represents the personification of God. Radha is the adorable joy attribute. All these ideas I am not giving much importance to at this time because there is no need for that. So those of you who read the biography of Nimbarka, the bigger works on Nimbarka, may hear a lot about this divine feminine archetype like Radha. who is a feminine consort of Radha Krishna, according to Nimbarka's tradition. So I am deliberately skipping those aspects from our discussion. Again, there are a few important things to remember about Nimbarka's famous books. According to most of the modern scholars, and modern scholars have this tendency to debate regarding the authorship of many of the important theological and philosophical books. According to many modern scholars, not all, there is only one book that we can be sure was written by Nimbarka, that is Vedanta Parijata Saurabha. That is his magnum opus, so to speak. Most important book that he wrote. It's a brief commentary on Brahma Sutras, or Badarayana Sutras. And this is the foundation of Dvaita philosophy. That's an important point to remember. And then it should also be kept in mind that there are a few other books which may be with all justification attributed to Nimbarka. And one of them is, for example, Rahasya Mantra Rahasya Shodashi. It is a book that explains the importance of Sri Gopala Mantra in verses. Gopala Mantra is a way of propitiating, meditating, doing worship of this Radha Krishna aspect. This one important book, which perhaps was of course written by Nimbarka. And then there is another very, very important book which very likely can be attributed to Nimbarka. That is Prapanna Kalpavalli. That is also more or less not entirely confirmed, but by majority of scholars, it is a work that is attributed to Nimbarka with all justification. And another important book is Deshashloki, that is Kamadhenu, that is 10 verses. And then there are a few more works which, according to their denomination, their hierarchical tradition, were written by Nimbarka. I am just mentioning them for curiosity of students who are interested in this. One is Sadajara Prakasha, a treatise on Karma Kanda. I mean, what's the right, but how to perform dharma, how to perform ethical values in our everyday life. Then Prapatti Chintamani, that is a treatise on supreme surrender. In fact, this Prapanna Kalpavalli also deals with this idea, this concept of self-surrender, complete surrender to God. In this respect, according to some historians, Nimbarka took this idea from Ramanuja's book, either from Sharanagati Gadyam, one of Gadyatraya, or Vedanta Desika's well-known book, Lakshmi Tantra. There are quite a few books that deal with this concept of self-surrender, taking refuge in God completely. This idea was expanded and expounded by Nimbarka in this Prapatti Chintamani and Prapanna Kalpavalli. Then also another small devotional hymn is called Pratasmarana Stotram. In morning you chant this with great devotion. And then you find sometimes in some sources, it cannot be taken very seriously, the view that Nimbarka actually wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, but it is not fully accepted by scholars. This is only to give a clear picture of Nimbarka's system. And then his system was called, as I mentioned earlier, it's called Swabhavika Bheda, natural, spontaneous interpretation of difference and non-difference. That is, this world and all the different living beings are distinct and different from Brahman, from God, one view, and they are non-distinct from Brahman, other view. So one can be attributed to Advaita, the other can be attributed to Dvaita. So Nimbarka system is a combination of these two, distinction and non-distinction, difference and non-difference. It's called Bheda Bheda. Bheda means distinction, Abheda means non-distinction. That's to distinguish this view from an earlier philosopher who lived in 9th century. His name is Bhaskara. Nimbarka system came to be called by the name Swabhavika Bheda Abheda. I already gave a brief introduction, and today we are going to enter some of his important texts. One is Vedanta Pariyada Saurabha, his own book, and also a commentary by Srinivasa, Vedanta Kaustubha. So it's very interesting, you can imagine this culture of writing a book one after another. And you'll be surprised, some of you will be surprised and slightly entertained if I mention to you that there are some scholars who will tell you that Nimbarka actually wrote a book called Madhya Mukha Mardana. We know what it means literally, a slap on the face of Madhvacharya. Now, this is very entertaining, Again, it's only an intellectual, metaphysical, dialectical kind of writing of an extreme form, of extreme disagreement. But that according to most scholars in modern times, Nimbarka did not write any book like that. But you may come across this idea. Afterwards, some you may feel that I did not mention this, and here is somebody mentioning a book that Nimbarka actually wrote a book called Madhya Mukha Mardana. Literal translation will be somewhat unpleasant, means a slap on the face of Madhva. So, anyway, just I'm mentioning this for the curious students, that's all. So, Nimbarka mentioned, as you may remember, that this world is not mithya. So, he has got a sharp disagreement with the Advaitins, with Shankaracharya's view. That is, this world is not mithya. According to Shankaracharya, this world is mithya, and mithya means non-absolute, in the sense that this world does not remain without change all the time. Therefore, it is mithya. Mithya does not mean unreal in the absolute sense. Mithya means something that is subject to changes, that changes in time and space. So, and another important point to remember is Nimbarka also accepts this Vivartavada. That is, Vivarta means this world, the absolute reality appears to have become this world, not has actually transformed. So in this respect, it's a sharp disagreement with the Parinamavada, Brahma Parinamavada of Ramanuja. The Ramanuja believed in the actual and real transformation of God into all the different living beings. All the different living beings in this world and the world itself are evolutes of God. So God has evolved and has come out of God through evolution. And Nimbarka will have nothing to do with that. He's totally disagreed with that view. So that's why it is called Swabhavika Bheda Bheda. And again, a few things remember I mentioned earlier, just to repeat, because the Nimbarka system is not so well known outside the small community, which have their own way of worshipping. If you go to Vrindavan, if you go to some of the big Vaishnava centers of India, you find the followers of Nimbarka. So one view is that this world is the scene, called Drishyam, Jagat we call. This perceived, the objective world, empirical world is one entity. Again, all the different living beings, Jiva Samuha, according to Sanskrit, means all the different living beings, human beings and others who see this world, who experience this world. Second entity. Third is the Ishvara, Ishvara, who is the controller. And the main function of anthropomorphic God in Nimbarka system is that God is a controller. He is a regulator. He is the one who decides what should happen in this world. So that is one. And then there is, at the highest level, there is called Akshara Brahma, that is Satchidananda. So you can find, on the one hand, there is this idea of a creator God, an anthropomorphic God who creates this world, who listens to our prayers, who takes care of everything, Niyanta. At the same time, there is another aspect, a transcendental, empirical interpretation of the same creator God as Brahman, who is the transcendental reality. And then again, this jiva, all the different living beings, they are doing things. They have kartrutva and bhoktrutva. They do things and they also enjoy the results of their actions. In Sanskrit, it's called kartrutva, bhoktrutva, etc. So, and also different living beings, empirical objects. So, they are identical with Brahman. They are also different from Brahman. So, these two apparently contradictory views are fused to form this unique system, this unique approach to absolute reality in Nimbarka system. Now we are coming, just to give an example, now I am just entering some of the text just to justice the subjects. One important topic discussed in the system is, of course, what is the, how does this world emerged? How this world emerged, and then what is the source of knowledge of God? Some of these ideas are discussed in Vedanta Pariyada Saurabha, Nimbarka's commentary on Vedanta Sutras, Brahma Sutras, and also much more elaborated in Vedanta Kaustubha. It's a commentary on Nimbarka's book written by his disciple Srinivasa. Now surprisingly you find the disciple in his interpretation of the Guru's work, his teacher's work, he comes somewhat closer to Advaita of Shankara than Nimbarka himself. So there are views among scholars that Srinivasa, who was the commentator of Nimbarka's commentary on Brahma Sutras, he was highly influenced by the teachings of Shankaracharya. This is one view, not fully confirmed. One important thing to remember, and maybe I should have mentioned at the very beginning itself, many of these scholars, they did not clearly record the year of completing the book, writing this book, how they began to write, and when they completed. And so the historical records are very meager, almost non-available in many cases. That's true for many of these great writers, great scholars, not only of Hindu Vedantic tradition, but also Buddhist tradition. For example, we don't have a clear picture of the life of Buddha even, except from what we get from Tripitakas. We don't have a clearly recorded history of Buddha. Very similar to Jesus Christ, and we don't have a clear historical record. We don't have. And again, we don't know who were the disciples. But at the end of the book, many of them wrote one verse. Sometimes at the end or maybe the beginning, they wrote one verse in which they attributed the inspiration. they attributed their inspiration to their guru, and at the promptings of their guru, they happened to write this well-known book. That's an integral part of their writing. But other than that, there is no clear historical records. So there is some ambiguity when you talk about the historicity or the historical accuracy of the dates of writings of many of these books. So one important part of Vedanta Pariyada Saurabha is the well-known sutra, third sutra, Brahma Sutras. That is Arthado Brahma Jignasa, Janmadhyasya and Shastra Yonitvad. See, Shastra Yonita is the third sutra. That's how the exposition of Nimbarka's system begins in Vedanta Parijata. So that's why it's so important. Just reading, Evam Jijnasa Sutrena Brahma Jijnasyam Ityuktam Lakshana Sutrena Cha Jagat Janmadi Karanatva Satyatva Adimatvam Brahma Lakshanam Uktam Idanim Tatra Kim Pramanam Iti Akamshayam Pramanam Uchyate. This is the beginning of that interpretation of that third sutra. But it means is this. Now, the first sutra is Adhado Brahma Jijnasa. So there is a reference to the first sutra. The sutra means now we will begin an inquiry into the understanding of what is the true nature of Brahman. That's how it begins. Now, Evam Jijnasa Sutrena Brahma Jijnasyam Ityuktam. Now, one important thing is, if you look at the text at the very beginning, the first sutra is Adhado Brahma Jijnasa. So, now let's begin. We are beginning an inquiry and investigation into the nature of Brahman, into the nature of absolute reality. Now, at the very beginning, there are arguments. Why should we worry about inquiring into the nature of Brahman? Where is a need for it? And in some of commentaries in the Advaita tradition, there are also funny, slightly humorous ways of putting this. Intellectually, it's very entertaining. So, I told you about Bhamati Tiga. We discussed many portions of this in the earlier sessions. Bhamati is a Tiga written by Vajaspati Misra on Brahma Sutras of Shankaracharya. I mean, the Bhashya, commentary of Shankaracharya on Brahma Sutras. On this, another great scholar and a follower of Shankaracharya, his name is Vajaspati Misra, he wrote a commentary. It's known as Bhamati. And I told you about the history of how he came to be written. He was a married man, Vajaspati. He already started writing this commentary on Shankara Bhashya, Shankara's commentary. But he had not completed. A young man he married. But he did not forget what he was writing. So practically he kept writing for almost 35 years. So 35 years passed. And then every day he used to write, get up in the morning, Sandhya Vandan, he used to write, and the lady, his wife, used to prepare his breakfast, lunch. This went on for 35, 36 years. And the book was approaching its end. And then evening, he found that the lamp, the oil lamp was fading. So he found an old lady was pouring some oil into the lamp. He was wondering, who is this old lady? Looked at, he was his own wife, whom he had married 35 years earlier, 36 earlier. So tears rolled down his eyes because he had completely forgotten his responsibilities to the old lady. And the book came to the book was completed within a few days. In a hurry, he completed the book. And I'm actually referring to that book so very soon. And then he was so sorry that he could not do his duty responsibility to the married woman. But woman also was a great person, as great as Vajaspati himself. So, as a penance, as a compensation for her sacrifice, because she never complained, never told him, you stop writing. Instead, she served him, helped him. She took all the care of the household duties, everything, so that her husband could complete the great book he was writing. The great, is one of the greatest Vedantic texts written during post-Shankarite times. Maybe the greatest perhaps after Shankaracharya's time. The most important books of Shankaracharya is the books themselves. So as a penance, he named that book Bhamati, which was the name of his wife. So his wife still lives in the minds of the great students of Advaita Vedanta. So that's the greatness of this book, Bhamati. Now, in that book, it's a very abstract book. No, one should learn from a teacher. At the beginning itself, he is asking, I'm just giving an example, a sample of these arguments taking place in Vedantic textbooks. Brahma, he says, Kim Brahma jijnasyam adhava na jijnasidavyam adhava na jijnasidavyam. See, sarvam khalidam Brahma. Brahman is everything. Brahman is everywhere. Put in modern, let's say modern Western context, God is everywhere. Then why should you inquire into God? Because He is everywhere. Brahma, sarvam khalu idam Brahma. Everything in this world is Brahman. Let's say God. Brahma kim jijnasidavyam adhava na jijnasidavyam. Then why should you worry about inquiring to the nature of Brahman? Because everything is Brahman. So no need to inquire into Brahman. So the first sutra itself is meaningless. Now, this argument continues, and then we realize that it is only an objection. It is not the author's view. The author is putting forward the objector's view to prepare his background for his reply. So, that means you are questioning the very first sutra, the logic of the first sutra. And all these objections are put forward to prepare the background for the grand reply that is coming. This is the grandeur of the book. So, it's of course, Vedanta Pariyada Kaustuba cannot claim that level of pedigree or intellectual grandeur. Absolutely not. But still, the beginning, Nimbarka himself, he must have read Bhamati Tika of Vajaspati. So the subject also is somewhat similar. Nanu Jijnasa Sutrena Brahma Jijnasyam Ityuktam. So the first sutra, Adhado Brahma Jijnasa, it shows that Brahman is something that should be inquired into. It is something that we should inquire into to understand its true nature. Ityuktam Lakshana Sutrena cha Jagat Janmadi Karanatva Satyatva Adi Mattam Brahma Lakshanam Uttam Idanim Tatra Kim Pramanam Iti Agamshayam Pramanam Uchadi. So, it was pointed out that whether Brahman is to be inquired or not. So the answer is that Brahman should be inquired. Because whether Brahman, having stated mark, is to be arrived at through inference. So in the previous sutra I mentioned, Brahman is the origin of the emergence, existence and dissolution of the universe, of the world and everything else. So in that case, there is no need to learn scriptures. We can infer through inference, kulanumana. Through inference, we can assume the reality of Brahman. So, Nimbarka says no. Inference cannot be a means for inquiring into the nature of Brahman. Shastram alone, the revealed scriptures alone can be the basis for inquiring into Brahman, because Brahman as scripture as his source. So Brahman can be, the nature of Brahman can be understood only from scripture. Anything at the empirical level, we can understand through direct perception, and if that's not possible, through inference. But something that's beyond the empirical level, we need some source to get an idea, and then based on that idea, we have to make inquiry not at the empirical level but another level. So that is how the argument begins. Uktalakshanam Brahma Anumanadi Gamyam Uchyade Veda Pramanagam Idi Samshaye Anumanadi Gamyam Yatova Vajo Nivartande Idi Brahmano Vag Agojrit Sravanadidi Purvapakshe. So people raise the objection. Purvapaksha means prima facie view. The objection is this. There is a statement in the Vedas, Yato Vajo Nivartande Aprapya Manasada. That means Yato Vajo Nivartande, where words and mind return without understanding. So, Yato Vajo Nivartande Aprapya Manasasaha. So, mind and words going in search of the absolute reality, and they return without realizing the true nature. Therefore, Brahman is Vak Agochara, means beyond the reach of words. So, Vak Agocharattu Sravanadidi Purvapakshe. So, we cannot understand Brahman through words. Words means Shastram. Therefore, an objection is raised against this sutra. And the sutra tells you that Brahman as Shastram, scriptures as the source, as the proof. So, the very beginning, a different view, an objection is raised. The scriptures tell you that Brahman is beyond words. Vachama Gocharam, beyond reach of words. Yato Vacho Nivartante Aprapya Manasasaha. Mind and words go in search of understanding Brahman, but they don't understand. They returned without realization. Therefore, what's the use of reading scriptures? So inference alone is enough. This is the objection. So you can find at the very beginning, Purvapaksha means an objection is raised against the very justification, against the very logic of the sutra that's being discussed. That's how it begins. Then an argument is put forward to establish the logic and the necessity of that sutra, of the statement. Brahma na anumanadi gamyam kindu veda pramanagam kudaka shastrayonitva shastram vedaka yoni karanam jnabagam pramanam yasmin tat shastrayoni tasya bhavaga tattvam tasma shastrayonitva shastra pramanagatvad Vedaika Pramanagam Brahma idi Siddhantaka. So the absolute reality is beyond reach of inference. It cannot be reached through inference. Why? Because already mentioned here, the sutra is the Shastrayonitvad. Therefore, Vedaika Pramanagam Brahma idi Siddhantaka. The view put forward by Nimbarka school is that Brahman can be understood only through scriptures. Now I shall come to another level to make it more clear in modern context. Now, we normally use our power of direct perception, inference, comparison, or verbal testimony. All these tools we use, the epistemological tools we use, we can use them only when we try to understand and explain and analyze something belonging to empirical perception. Whatever we can perceive and understand using our mind and the five senses of perception. Whatever we see, we can understand that through direct perception, or inference, or comparison, or whatever other means, the tools of epistemology. But what is beyond empirical, what beyond the empirical perception, or empirical comprehension, it cannot be analyzed or understood by using any of these tools, including inference. And the transcendental reality, Brahman, or you may call God if you want, that absolute reality is not within the empirical level. Therefore, it is not within the purview of epistemology. So, direct perception or inference cannot explain something that is beyond the empirical. Therefore, Brahman cannot be understood through Anumana. So this is the view of Nimbarka's philosophy. Just give an example. Nimbarka continues, Nanu Laghava Shastrayonityeva Suvajam Tathaja Shastrayoni Veda Pramanagam Brahma Iti Ishtasiddhi Idi Chet Na Anumanadigamyam Brahma Shastrayonitya Idi Idhar Pramanaga Vighantakam Idi. So, because the sutra mentions that Brahman has revealed scriptures like Vedas in this context, Vedas as a proof. Because Vedas alone mention this absolute reality that is beyond the empirical. So therefore, from these scriptures, we come to know of this absolute reality which is beyond empirical perception. And then when we try to inquire, make direct or inquiry into the scriptures, and then after that we follow the spiritual disciplines mentioned in the scriptures, then we can understand nature of reality. So this is how this argument continues. So I shall try to explain this later in the coming sessions. We can have an interaction. You are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Sri Ram has his hand up first.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Ramanujacharya emphasizes Prapatti.
Yeah.
You also mentioned Nimbarka emphasizes Prapatti. What about Madhvacharya?
Yeah, Madhvacharya believed in grace, in the grace of God. But Madhvacharya did not develop any unique concept of Prapatti or Sharanagati. This is an important point. So the Prapatti ideal from Ramanuja was later taken up by Nimbarka Acharya in his Prapatti Chintavani or Prapatti, that Kalpavalli. So Prapanna Kalpavalli, so it's called. So that is the view. In fact, you find in modern times there are controversies on this subject. There are some scholars who believe that Nimbarka lived before Ramanuja. So Ramanuja got different Nimbarka. Different views are there. But Nimbarka also, surprisingly, discusses the 6 aspects related to Prapatti. Prapatti means self-surrender. So try to explain this to those who are being listening, know already. So when we reach a state where we find that our resources are not adequate enough, not enough for us to get spiritual enlightenment. We practice karma yoga, prayer, meditation, attending your holy liturgy, whatever it you do. And you find that your mind is still restless. You cannot concentrate. And your own mind is not willing to cooperate. So you find, in spite of your best effort, you feel in your heart that you have come to a dead end. So that is why Ramanuja put it in a very philosophical language. The credit for evolving this unique concept of self-surrender into distinct philosophy and spiritual tool goes to Ramanuja. So he says, Ananyagatitvam, that is one important thing. So Ananyagatitvam means there is no one else you can take refuge in. And Akinchanyam, you feel you are totally helpless, you are totally destitute. There is no one else for you to turn into, no one to support you. At that point, in your heart, you silently surrender yourself to a higher power. And when you do that, you feel your own karmic blocks are get dismantled, and you become a tool in the hands of a higher power. Now, Madhvacharya does not talk about this kind of self-surrender. But Madhvacharya talks about grace. Through grace only you can get moksha, liberation, and spiritual enlightenment. But Ramanujacharya developed this into this Anugulyasya Sankarpaha, Pradigulyasya Vardhanam, Rakshasidhi Vishwasa, Goptrukta Varanamdatha, Atma Nikshepaka Arpanation, Vidha Sharanagati. All these 6 tools, already explained many times in the past. You should have positive thoughts all the time, remove all negative thought currents, negativity. Then you should have a strong faith that God will protect you. God is only protector. You depend upon Him. And then you feel yourself to be totally helpless. And then Atmanikshava, you surrender yourself. When this happens, that's the end of your own efforts. So when your own glass is empty, suddenly you feel it is full, it is filled by higher power. So when you empty your own vessel, suddenly you feel it is filled with something higher by God. So it is a kind of hotline. So Ramanuja developed this into a unique system. And also in some other books in Ramanuja, like Lakshmi Tantra, they discuss these things. And they consider the 66th verse of Gita, 18th chapter, Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mamekam Saranam Praja Aham Tva Sarva Bhabebhyo Mokshashyami Vasya. This is important for Ramanuja. So the point is, Nimbarka talks about this in his Prabhati Chintamani and also Prabhanna Kalpavalli. But mostly it must be from the original source should be Ramanuja's works. This idea behind. Okay, thank you.
वही अद्वैता विषय जगन मिथ्या इसे लौकिक से जगन 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 असत. What is the distinction between asat and mithya? Prapancha of nama rupa is
yeah, I tell you. Okay. Now you know the difference is this. You said asat. Asat is something that cannot even be conceived of existing by anyone. Secondly, you make the statement itself denies its possible existence. For example, use the word Sasavishana, the horns of a hare. Hares don't have horns. So, if you are mentioning Sasavishana, the horns of a hare, it's obvious that it is not hare if it has horns. Then again, if it is hare, it cannot have horns. So again, Gandharva Nagara, a city in the sky. These are all just examples only. We cannot even intellectually conceive of it existing in any way, by any stretch of imagination. That is called asat, absolute non-existence. Even you cannot even talk about it, think about it, or imagine anything about it, because the very thought of it tells you that it is absolutely unreal. Mithya is something that we believe to be real till we realize that it is not real, it is mithya. So in other words, to give an example, it's called vyavaharika. See, if you are looking at something, the sky, the mountains, the chairs, maybe a picture on your wall, they belong to mithya. Why? Just because they don't exist all the time, everywhere, in the same manner. They're subject to changes. So anything that is subject to changes in time cannot be real in the absolute sense. Because to be called real in the absolute sense, you may use the word capital letter R for real. To be called to be real in the absolute sense, it should exist in the same fashion without any change all the time. Nothing in this world can be called real in that sense. Because the cosmos, the universe, the mountains, they all exist maybe for some billions of years. But again, they don't remain without any change. They change all the time. If they are changing, they are mithya. So mithya is not absolute unreality. Mithya, in other words, is something that that's existing relative to time and space. Relative to time, because in times they undergo changes. Anything that changes is mithya. That's the idea behind. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri Ram. Excellent. Shay, you're next. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Namaskar, Swamiji.
Namaste.
My question is about this Nimbarka's Brahma Sutra commentary, and more broadly, what defines a school of Vedanta? What defines a separate, unique, new school? And is it that commentary on the Brahma Sutra? Like, does someone have to come along and have a unique perspective specifically on Brahma Sutra? Or what defines that unique school? Because it seems like each has a different view on Brahma Sutra.
Yeah. You know, all these teachers used to be called acharyas. And to become an acharya, it was supposed that you should write a commentary on Brahma Sutras. Without writing a commentary on Brahma Sutras, you will not be designated as an acharya. Chaitanya did not write. So one philosopher belonging to Chaitanya tradition, Baladeva, wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutras. So Nimbarka wrote a commentary on Brahma Sutras with his own view. And another point I want to mention to you, many people who lived in those days could not fully understand intellectually or emotionally, did not feel comfortable with the idea that this beautiful world, God's creation, is mithya. Now, remember, if you analyze it from a very scientific perspective, there is nothing shocking about this idea that this world is mithya. It is a statement of fact, which is so obvious. But people, you have to remember, people living in those days, many of them had strong devotional temperaments, very strong devotional temperaments. So they could not think of this world created by their great, compassionate, beautiful, anthropomorphic God. How can you call this world as mithya? They could not emotionally come into terms with that idea. It was so shocking. You have to remember Ramanuja had a shocking experience when he was learning Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta from Yadava Prakasa, his teacher. And he revolted and left the Vedic hermitage, the Gurukula, the Vedic school. Madhvacharya was learning Ishtasiddhi, Vimukta means Ishtasiddhi. And he also revolted against it. Now, when they revolted against Advaita, it does not mean that Advaita is wrong. That can happen. People who are emotionally more of a devotional temperament, they will naturally have a more realistic understanding and interpretation of the world and God. That's why I mentioned to you. I come back to the early subject. See, Vivekananda came to this country in 1893. Now, what was the situation in this country? See, in the mid-19th century, Karl Marx came and wrote Communist Manifesto, and Engels, of course, and Das Kapital, both together made a big change in the entire concept of Karl Marx was a poverty-stricken man who was teaching this world how to distribute wealth, which he did not have any wealth to distribute after all, He was one of the poorest men living in London during his time. And he was teaching the world how to distribute property. Now remember, but then he wrote something which had its impact on the thinking minds of even America in the East Coast. Remember, not here, in the East Coast. So also in England, in Germany and other places. Again, Charles Darwin wrote The Origin of Species. It was a shattering blow to the creationist views, the Genesis, which people, the clergy was teaching. So, this was the intellectual climate, and then modern science and technology developing. So Americans listening to Vivekananda could appreciate, so when Swamiji talked about some higher non-anthropomorphic spiritual concepts. So Advaita became the watchword. Not clearly, but still Swamiji's interpretation of religion from this humanistic metaphysical perspective caught the attention of many thinking people. So the intellectual climate, the intellectual landscape of the time, in many ways determines the receptivity or the acceptance of a doctrine. So Shankaracharya's system was accepted by the greatest thinkers of many parts of India, especially those who were highly educated in philosophy. But there were humble people in the villages who were worshipping the deity in the village temple. And they didn't want to be told that their God in their small little village temple is not absolutely real, or that God's creation of this world is not real. They didn't want to be. They wanted something that is more satisfactory to their emotions. That's an important thing to remember. So they were not like the 4,000 Americans sitting in Columbus Hall listening to Vivekananda. They were humble people living in villages. They wanted something that could fill their hunger, answer the intellectual hunger, emotional hunger. So Ramanuja revolted, did not like the way a statement was being interpreted by his own teacher, Yadav Prakasha. He revolted. But he could, and he was saying, he revolted because he thought Shankaracharya's philosophy was not giving enough justification, enough place, enough respect to devotion. But he could have walked a few miles and reached the temple in his own place, and you find they were all perhaps chanting Shankaracharya's devotional hymns. Shankaracharya is the greatest devotional poet of India. No one wrote anything comparable to what he wrote, his own devotional poems. So also Madhvacharya. So again, there was a difference of 350 years between Shankaracharya and Ramanuja. 150 years between Ramanuja and Madhva. And between these two, Nimbarka came. So remember, in 8th century, 7th century, 9th century, 10th century, 11th century, 12th century, in those days, 150 years, 200 years, 300 years, a long period. And there was no communication. So somebody listening to Advaita, maybe a very lopsided interpretation of Advaita, will feel the need for a more emotional understanding of God and religion. So Ramanuja became a visitor Advaitin. This is an important point to remember. So they wrote different books. So this is the story. So it was the need of human emotions. Human mind needs devotion. Otherwise it will go dry. That's true. So Ramanuja had his place. So also Madhvacharya. Okay.
Now, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to ask a follow-up. Now, my practical question is, all of us here in this Zoom, I think, we're householders.
Yeah.
We maybe have jobs. We have responsibilities outside of studying Vedanta. Like this Brahma Sutra, should we approach Brahma Sutra? Or should we stick with Bhagavad Gita and Karma Yoga and maybe more simple, not simple, but just more digestible? Like, is it practical for us to read Brahma Sutra?
Yeah, true. In fact, Bhagavad Gita is simple enough and contains everything. Bhagavad Gita is a condensation of the Upanishadic thoughts. So, Brahma Sutra contains the intellectual, logical analysis and study of important statements from different Upanishad, different Vedic script texts. Bhagavad Gita, on the other hand, is a condensation of all that is good and great and relevant in the Vedic literature. Bhagavad Gita is very simple. It can be very simple. It can be like a manual for our everyday life. Yeah, this is a very important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. You had mentioned that Nimbarka's disciple, Srinivasa,
Yeah.
produced a very, very important work. I'm going to check the
Yeah.
meaning here.
Yeah. Vedanta Kaustubha is the work by Srinivasa, who is a disciple of Nimbarka.
I had an audio glitch, so I was hoping you'd repeat the name one more time, please.
That is Vedanta Kaustubha is the name of the book by Srinivasa, who was a disciple of Nimbarka Acharya. Nimbarka.
Thank you very much. Another question I have, in the, I'm getting an echo, but I'll continue. In the Divine Life Society and Yoga Vedanta,
Yeah.
they do IoT, they do pranams to the lineage of gurus, and
Yeah.
they will invoke Bhaskaraya. They invoke Bhaskaracharya.
Yeah.
And Barka, being from the Vaishnava tradition,
Yeah.
is not invoked. And you've made some comments that Nimbarka's, not as universally prominent. But
Yeah.
it does mean that I'm looking for who to mute here. Because
Sound disturbance. Sound disturbance can you?
I'm looking to see where that's coming from, and I can't see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll just continue because I
Yeah.
can't
Please
mute.
please continue. Please continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please. No, it's
Which
clear.
actually
Yeah.
it goes to the point you made earlier.
Yeah. Please continue. Yeah.
All right. So the divisions that we see in the various devotional traditions, where some will be elevated and some not, make a lot of sense if they're looking at their own lineage. But from the Advaita perspective, we shouldn't pay much attention to that.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, Advaitins also pay respect to the parampara, the lineage, but they don't cling to the lineage the way Vaishnavites do, because that's a very important. Advaitins also stick to the lineage, but then their clinging to the lineage is different from the clinging of Vaishnavites. Vaishnavites elevate their gurus to the status of the supreme frequently, but Advaitins, they generally look upon lineage as one ancient link that connects them to the supreme reality, and it is less anthropomorphic, so to speak.
Yes, that's my impression. So it's just interesting to see how the Jaivite community parallels that as well with Bhaskaracharya.
Yeah, I will tell you Bhaskaracharya. See, Bhaskaracharya lived before Nimbarka and before Ramanuja. So his system of philosophy was called Bheda, which actually in a way is somewhat similar, not entirely, but similar to Ramanuja's system and also Nimbarka system. But again, it is a combination, it's a blending of difference and non-difference. So, but right now, Bhaskaracharya's system is not so well studied because his system did not produce this denomination, a community that is exclusively devoted to certain rituals recommended and taught by him. Nimbarka, on the other hand, he actually taught a way of worshipping Radha Krishna in Vrindavan and other places. And the lineage of Nimbarka still continues. The way to worship Krishna, Radha Indian temples. It's still existing. But Bhaskaracharya did not leave behind a community, a denomination that is exclusively devoted to his tradition, that follows his tradition, his instructions in worship or rituals. That's it. If you go to Vrindavan, if you go to many places in India, you find Nimbarka. Not as popular as Chaitanya, Ramanuja or Madhva, but still Nimbarka's followers are found in Vrindavan, many other places. He lived in Vrindavan, but he felt that that's a place associated with Lord Krishna. So a lot of this identity with the child Krishna playing in Vrindavan in ancient times, so the idea again, the idea of bringing a new feminine deity, Radha, who is not mentioned in this, has been not mentioned by Ramanuja or Madhva or in Bhagavata Purana. So Nimbarka elevated. I think there are many such sects and groups in India, certain denominations which follow certain paths,
Maharaj, I'm going to continue this line of questioning. There are no other hands.
Yeah,
nor
thank
on.
you so much.
I'm going to ask because it seems to be very, very broad-minded for for our instruction here to include all these other paths.
Yeah.
Whereas in many other contexts you wouldn't get the breadth that we're getting here.
Thank you.
Or something to comment on and appreciate. I wanted to ask you, very early on tonight, you said something that fascinated me, and you used the words transcendental and transempirical, and you followed up on describing transcendental as transempirical.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very valuable because for those who might not have a ready definition for transcendental or might not be able to hang their hat on that, so to speak, to say it's transempirical is very easy to understand.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that was meant to be a way of making it clearer, or whether or not you think those two are parallel.
Well, transcendental is a word normally used in philosophy, in discussions. Transempirical, you can make, you're trying to trying to be clearer what it means. Be going beyond the empirical.
But they really are the same.
Yeah. Excuse me?
Are they the same?
They can be the same in a broad sense, yeah. Again, when you go deeper into the dictionary part of it, the meaning, there could be differences, but it's the same. See, I had a transcendental feeling of transcendental bliss, means bliss experience that transcends, that goes beyond everything, so paramount in that sense. But in philosophy, transcendental can be very similar to what noumenal, Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the idea behind it. Kantian language.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that I understand. Thank you, Maharaj. I had another question, but Sri Ram has his hand up, so please go ahead. Sri Ram.
Just to emphasize,
Yeah.
use hobby's term. The Advaita experience is transcendental, right? It's India, Agocharam,
Yeah.
Acha Agocharam.
True. Yeah, an experience can be transcendental either in Advaita or in non-Advaita systems. In devotional life also one can have a transcendental experience. So one way of understanding the meaning of transcendental, it is something beyond explanation, beyond description, beyond any kind of effort to explain or verbalize, describe. So something that goes beyond everything. That could be a kind of a devotional ecstasy, can be of a transcendental nature, devotional ecstasy. A poet, when he reads, when he composes a poem, he can have a transcendental experience, Without some degree of transcendental experience, you cannot write a really great book or poem or verse or hymn or anything. Because you have to go beyond the empirical and connect yourself to something transcendental to be able to write or read or paint or compose anything of lasting value. It's very important. So it can have so many different levels of interpretations and understanding, perception, transcendental. In spirituality, it has got one meaning. In poetry it has been. Literature has different meaning. In music, a great musicians will get a feeling of transcendental bliss. Without that, he won't be able to sing to the highest degree of perfection or to compose to the highest degree of perfection. You have to go beyond this world, connect yourself to something beyond this world, to write, to paint, to think, or to compose, or to sing anything of higher, sublime nature. Okay, thank you for the question. And I should thank Bobby, you inspired so many other students to raise very meaningful questions, and I should ask everyone, okay, thank you for this wonderful session, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
All of you, thank you so much. So also Sri Ram, Shay, everyone, okay, thank you so much, everyone. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu. Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you so much. Thank you.